What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here, PackersNews.com. A little bit earlier than usual here on Tuesday, but breaking news. First reported by ESPN. I just confirmed it a little bit ago. The Green Bay Packers are indeed signing a free agent. They've agreed to terms with former Seattle Seahawk and New Orleans Saint tight end Jimmy Graham. It was reported that Aaron Rodgers had spoken to Graham about coming to play in Green Bay, and it sure seems like that lobbying has worked. The Packers set to bring in an offensive weapon who, yes, is on the downside of his career. There's no doubt about that. He was a very effective weapon in the red zone last season, 10 touchdowns on the year, although his yards per catch did plummet comparative to the rest of his career in 2017. But he will bring a added dimension to the Packers offense that had been missing after Jared Cook walked out the door. Obviously, last year, the addition of Martellus Bennett was a giant disappointment. Never offered anything in the passing game. Jimmy Graham instantly upgrades that position, gives Rodgers somebody who can work not only down the seam, across the middle of the field, but definitely, like I said, helps them in the red zone, gives them a true number one tight end target for their franchise quarterback, who, in the other news of the day, not directly with the Packers, but affecting them, the Minnesota Vikings signing Kirk Cousins to a 3-year fully guaranteed contract. That should jumpstart talks between the Packers and Rodgers on an extension. Although he does have 2 years left on his deal, you have to think the Packers are now going to want to move with haste to try and get him a new deal that not only extends the quarterback into the foreseeable future, but helps alleviate some of his cap hit in 2018. But the big news today, Jimmy Graham coming on board on what is reportedly a 3-year deal. I couldn't nail down any of the particulars on the contract. ESPN reported it was a 3-year deal. We'll see what the money really is there. You have to think it's most likely, I would suspect, a 2-year deal, really, with an easy out after the second year, possibly even after the first year. But the Packers go and get an offensive weapon on the second day of the legal tampering period. I had tons of people showing up here with all sorts of questions and all sorts of different emojis. I understand the trepidation around some of the fan base that were not enamored with the move, at least judging by the instant reaction on my Twitter feed. I also understand why some people in the fan base wanted to go get him. I do think he should open things up much like Jared Cook did 2 years ago. There's no question that the Packers offense was much more effective when they had a receiving presence at tight end, whether it was Jared Cook or Jermichael Finley back in the day. They have been most effective with that kind of presence. So we'll see in regards to Graham and ingratiate him into the offense. But first blush, positive sign for the Packers and their offense, trying to open things up, so to speak, in 2018. Let's see what we got here. We got all sorts of comments from folks chiming in. Everyone is tripping about corners. Relax. Free agents can't even sign until tomorrow. We are probably going to go after a few then. I would agree. On the defensive side of the ball, yeah, you've got to think they probably still have their eyes on a few guys out there. I know Tremaine Johnson has been linked to Green Bay by a few people, including my former colleague Bob McGinn a couple days ago. Aaron Colvin from the Jags went off the board today to the Texans, and Brashawn Breeland was signed shortly before the Jimmy Graham news broke. But you are right, plenty of corners still out there for them to look at. Anthony, I hope Jimmy Graham has learned the art of blocking. I'm not going to be able to give you a glowing report there. He is still very much a suspect blocker, although a willing one, which is something he wasn't in his early days in New Orleans. But he will undoubtedly, stick his nose in there, so to speak. In a way that maybe he wouldn't have earlier on in his career. Sorry, guys. I'm getting lots of texts and making sure I don't miss anything. Is Mo Claiborne a possible target? Yeah, I would have to think so. He's the type of free agent I think they would definitely have to take a look at. There's no doubt that a lot of these first wave guys are going to be out of their price range, but I think Mo Claiborne, definitely somebody who they could get a year or two out of while undoubtedly drafting a few more corners, but he's somebody that could hold down the fort, so to speak, for the year or two. Bennett could block it. How did that work out? Well, that's one way to look at it, definitely. If Bennett could have just held on to the ball, he'd been much more effective. And I understand, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, Graham is not exactly coming off a year where he was stellar catching the football, but he did have 10 touchdowns, which is a lot more than any Packers tight end has had in a long time. Let's see. How about Ladarius Webb? I liked Ladarius Webb as a corner back in the day. I know he'd been playing safety. Maybe the Packers take a look there, although I doubt it. I still think they draft Fumagalli if available. I think so, but probably not until the third day of the draft. Sorry, guys. Yeah, busy day. We need Johnson or Butler or both at corner. I don't know about that. Jason, I think they definitely need to add, add talent. And now here you go, coming across the old wire here. Yep. Make sure I read it first before I say it out loud. Yep. Jordy Nelson has been released by the Green Bay Packers. So there you go. What a move. Lots of Packer fans have been asking for this to happen, and sure seems like that would be the case. Let's see. Were you disappointed that Colvin didn't get signed? No, not at all. I understand why they would sit that out. I figured he was going to get big money. A lot of guys still left out there. Are we releasing Jordy Allen? Yes, the Packers are. Jordy Nelson was just released. Yes, he was. Why are we signing offensive players and not defense? Chris, because the new league year hasn't even started yet. So we can't go without a cornerback. It's March 13th, so they'll be okay. Wilkerson and a corner and a good draft, and I'm good. Well, I would tend to agree with that. Let's see. They're going after 2 other receivers. Well, they were, Chuck, as of yesterday, but maybe they're looking at somebody down the road, maybe opening up a spot for someone like, say, John Brown, who's going to replace Nelson. It's possible that they bring him back at a reduced rate. That's always a possibility, although I tend to doubt it. Maybe they like the idea of bumping up Geronimo Allison. Jordy was more sure-handed than Cobb. Not last year, he wasn't. Do we rule out a re-signing of Jordy at a lower deal? No, Austin. As I just said, I think that is definitely a legit possibility. He was released to get a new contract. That's very, very possible. They did it with A.J. Hawk back in the day. Who's going to host the softball game without Jordy? That's DeMario. That is the number one concern. I got to think Devontae, right? Hopefully we can get Cobb to restructure. That would be ideal. It's a possibility. Let's see here. Sorry, guys. Always stuff going on here. Let's keep the talent of Clark. Michael Clark, who I assume you're talking about there, is definitely a talent. There's raw talent there. He's very unrefined. We saw little glimpses of it there, weeks 16 and 17. We saw it definitely during camp, but he's a long way away from being a regular contributor on offense. Massive fellow from the UK. What's up, Scotty? What does Aaron Rodgers think of that? I think Aaron Rodgers thinks it ain't show friends, it's show business. Is it official that Jimmy Graham signed with the Packers? Well, no, we've reported it. It probably won't be official until tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. Who's Aaron going to do his ball spin with now? Oh, right to the heart. Pour one out. Okay, I haven't seen that anywhere about Jordy. Check ESPN. Adam Schefter just reported it a little bit ago. With Jordy leading the league in TDs before Rodgers went down, who do you think can take over for him? I think Jimmy Graham. Don't forget, most of those touchdowns from Nelson were in the red zone. Graham was a red zone fiend last year. Can't believe the money Sammy Watkins got. $16 million per. That undoubtedly put him out of Green Bay's range. There's no doubt about that. But they're, like I said, there's undoubtedly guys out there that could still look at with speed in free agency. With Jordy Nelson, You know, the big question I had coming into the offseason, I stated it a couple times on Twitter, was how ruthless was Brian Gutekunst going to be with his roster? And that cutting of Jordy tells you all you need to know. Do you think we will re-sign Richard Rodgers? Yes, I do. I think they will re-sign him for, a very cap-friendly deal. Raji coming back with a cleared-up cap space. I like it. Will you go live during Chelsea's game tomorrow? No chance. Going to need a new number 2 wide receiver. How high in the draft? Oh, they've had good success in the second round throughout the years, but we'll see. Any numbers on Jimmy's contract? Not yet, Kevin. Working on it. Do you think Rodgers had a hand to get Jimmy Graham? Dustin's reportedly he had been calling him and talking to him about it, so you got to think that little bit of coaxing / recruiting couldn't have hurt. Possible wide receiver in the second or third round? Max, you got to think it's a possibility at this point. When they or will they or did they send Hundley packing? Douglas, they haven't yet. I would tend to think they keep him around throughout the offseason as competition for the backup spot. They could move on. Maybe they cut him before that, but I tend to think he's a cheap, option as far as being on the last year of his rookie deal. Doesn't really make much sense. They're not going to get a trade offer for him. At least I'd be surprised if they did. I think we should go get a cornerback. I think they will probably do that with the next week or so. They're not re-signing Richard Rodgers. They'll get a different tight end in the draft. I tend to think they'll do both. Do they still have money for any DBs in free agency? Yes. It was just reported that Jordy was cut? Yes. If we utilize Jimmy Graham the way the New Orleans Saints did, then we'll be a great asset. I think it's much more about utilizing the way they did with Jermichael Finley back in the day and Jared Cook a few years ago. With Adams and Cobb at wide... Oh, sorry, guys, they go so fast. Cowboys and Bears have to be frantically calling Jordy's agent as we speak. Not if he's all as washed up as everyone tells me he is. Are they going to sign Jordy back? You got to think it's a possibility. Would rather have seen Cobb get released? Why? He's younger and more sure-handed and better after the catch. Are you surprised to see focus on offense rather than the defense? Not really. It's still very, 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 very early. A lot of ball game left in free agency. You're always getting better or you're always getting worse. There's clearly guys that are going to be prioritized in free agency. They undoubtedly, made their interest known with those wide receivers yesterday, Allen Robinson and Sammy Watkins, because they knew they'd be signed right away, as they were overnight last night. Now they also went in on Jimmy Graham early because they knew he'd be signed right away. The Saints were coming hard and heavy after him. But, clearly the Packers made their move there and got their guy. Now, undoubtedly, they'll turn and look at some other guys. I tend to think they'll still let it wait, kind of percolate for a few days, because I don't think they're going to overpay for anybody at any of the defensive positions. And free agency is about augmenting your roster. It's not usually about finding game changers, because oftentimes, most times, when free agents hit the market, there's always some kind of baggage. There's always some kind of issue. So you don't want to overpay for that. This first 24 to 48 hours often, not always, but often, is a whole lot of good to very good players getting great money. And that's a good way to get yourself in trouble down the road with the salary cap. Let's see, did Packers try and restructure Jordy's contract before the release? Luis, I'm sure we will try and find that out for you. I had not heard of any approach to Jordy or his people. We hadn't heard a word about it. I know Jordy Nelson had said publicly he was open to restructuring, but whether that conversation was ever had, I don't know. How much money do they gain from cutting Jordy? I believe roughly $11 million, but I'd have to look. Cobb should have been shown the door, so overrated. Bobby couldn't disagree more. What's the cap save in the Nelson being cut? Just answer that. Still a chance for a deep threat in free agency? I agree, Andy. John Brown's still sitting out there. Let's see. Graham won't do much for the run game. Agree there. I know moves happen, but what was Jordy gone for? Most likely age and effectiveness and salary. How long do you think Graham will be effective? 1 year rental, or does he have a few more years left? That's why I'm interested to see the structure of the deal. As I mentioned at the top of the video, I would tend to believe there's some kind of out after the first or second year. I can't believe he sees all 3 years of that deal. God, played horribly the last 2 seasons. Watch the tape. No, he didn't. What's Rogers' take on Nelson being released? I don't know, Juan. We'll have to wait and see. What do you think Jimmy's overall Madden ranking will be this year? Ooh, good question. 88. I don't know. What was he last year? I don't know. Can you talk about our cornerback situation? Well, they have one in that it's pretty poor at the moment, and they desperately need to turn it around. That said, I know they've been linked to Tremaine Johnson by a few people, former Rams corner. That would be a surprise to me if they actually made that signing, because I tend to think he's going to get in the neighborhood of 14, 15, even maybe $16 million. I can't imagine per year. I can't imagine they're going to shell out that kind of money for one corner, but I could be wrong. I have been before, and that's why they call my podcast Nagler's Never Right. But I definitely think they'll be looking at all sorts of different options throughout free agency to augment the position. But they have to look at the draft to kind of turn that position around long term. When Aaron was healthy, Jordy was elite despite his age. Man, that's a stretch. I wouldn't say he was elite. He was effective, and he produced, definitely in the red zone. But man, the father time was creeping in there. No doubt about it early on, even early on in the year when, when he was still scoring touchdowns, mostly because, Aaron Rodgers looked for him. But between the 20s, yards after the catch, things of that nature, he was slowing down. There's no doubt about that. If not Johnson, then what? Can't rely on rookies? Zach, there are lots and lots of other options. Hold on. Malcolm Butler is still out there? He is, although, again, I'd be surprised if that's the play. Do you have any other cap casualty predictions? No, I still think they extend Matthews. Maybe they restructure Cobb, but I can't imagine cutting someone. I've said pretty steadily all offseason that if they were to have to choose between Nelson and Cobb, they would probably cut Nelson. I'm a bit surprised that they didn't restructure him, but maybe they tried. Maybe they approached him and he refused. We're going to have to get to the bottom of it. Jordy, the last player to play with Favre? Other than Rodgers, yeah, I think so. Is that right? Yeah, I think you're right. Jordy's numbers dropped because of Hundley. Yes and no, Jason. Just saw that we are extending Cobb more money free. Oh, is that true? Is that for real? Hold on a second. Sorry, guys. Let's see. Sorry, guys. There we go. Go check on Rashad Melvin. I'll tell you what, Rashad Melvin makes a world more sense than Tremaine Johnson or Malcolm Butler to me. For those of you unfamiliar, he's a corner with the Colts who had a very good year prior to injuring his hand and being put on injured reserve. He was coming into his last year of his deal. He balled out. Now he's set to hit free agency. I don't think he's going to command the kind of money that Johnson and Butler will, but I think he'd be very effective. Melvin is the kind of player they should be looking at, and I suspect they will. I don't expect them to break the bank for a cornerback, but never know. We'll see. Did Jordy get released? Yes, Tate, he did. John Brown to Green Bay thoughts. Dustin, I love it. I love John Brown. I put it out there about a month ago that he made a ton of sense for Green Bay in the sense that he would absolutely bring a dimension to the offense that they have lacked for a long time. His explosiveness, short area quickness, and his flat-out speed. His ability to get deep is unlike anybody on the Packers roster. He would, instantly open up things on the offense. I don't think they need to, blow up their cap structure for him, but if they could get him for $5, $6, $7 million per year on a one-year deal, maybe we'll see. If you get the pass rush going, the corners will look better. I agree. The issue there, of course, is that you've got to You got to commit resources to get a pass rush. There's not a ton available in free agency, and it's not exactly a deep group of edge rushers in the draft. There are definitely names out there and guys that they'll undoubtedly look at and will be interested in, but depending on who you ask, there are, a handful of guys worthy of first-round selection, and then some projects after that. John Brown and Rodgers would be killer. I tend to agree. I'm hoping Pack bring him back for a cheaper deal. I would tend to think it's a possibility, but we'll have to see how it plays out. Is this the most viewers you've had at one time? At 1,100? Not quite. Close, though. Wanda says, I need to retire too. Wanda, that's just mean. Doesn't Rodgers have any say? No. Not in how the team is structured. No, he does not. What's the latest news on Wilkerson? He's visiting Washington today. I know he had dinner with the team brass last night. He's visiting Washington and company today. After that, I can't remember if he has another visit set up or not. I know he had talked with the Saints, Chiefs, and Redskins, and obviously started with the tour with the Packers. I would think they'd probably take a day, maybe less, to think about it, and then probably have some kind of idea either way, either tomorrow or the next day, where Wilkerson lands. You never play with Favre, you're right. Jordy Nelson never played with Favre. You are correct. Rodgers wants out. No, Rodgers does not want out. They literally just signed Jimmy Graham, a player that Aaron Rodgers had a hand in recruiting to Green Bay. They're about to make Aaron Rodgers the highest paid player in the history of the game, but Aaron Rodgers wants out. That makes no sense. Is Wilkerson just visiting teams for free dinners? That's fantastic. Whew. What do you think the Kirk Cousins signing does for the Vikings in the North? Tyson, I tell you what, it gives them a damn good team going into 2018. I'm very interested to see what it means going forward in regards to their defense and their ability to keep it together. We've seen teams, without quarterbacks or with quarterbacks on rookie deals, able to build up these ferocious defenses only to have to kind of dismantle them after their quarterback gets paid. The most recent example, obviously, being out in Seattle. Their defense is going to be completely different and overhauled after this offseason gets over. So I think for 2018, it definitely makes them probably your favorite in the NFC North. But long term, it'll be interesting to see what kind of effect it has on the franchise. Is Brent Selleck a fit? Dustin, I doubt they go there just because of his age, and they just signed Jimmy Graham. I know there had been a report out there from ESPN this morning. They were interested in Ed Dickson of the Panthers. Selleck, I think, I don't know, he's old and slow and got to go. Should we also invest into Murray? If you're talking about the running back, I would say no. Watkins and Robinson both signed with other teams. Robinson signed with the Bears. Watkins signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. Kirk Cousins has an overall losing record as a starter. That's not true because quarterback wins and losses is not a stat. It is a team stat, but it's not a quarterback stat. Are you thinking bringing in Moncrief for Nelson's place? I suppose it's a possibility, although all reports out there say the Ravens are the favorites to land his services, but maybe the Packers get in on that. I think he would be a good fit, definitely bring a presence on the perimeter, which they suddenly need, but I'd be surprised if they got into a bidding war for him. Jimmy Graham averaged 9.1 yards per catch last year. Rich Rodgers' career average is 9.9. I mentioned that at the top of the video. His yards per catch plummeted last year. However, he did score 10 touchdowns, which is something no Packers tight end has done in quite some time. And I think it's much more about how he opens up the offense, much like Jared Cook did 2 years ago. As Mike McCarthy said at that time, there's no stat to quantify what he does in regards to drawing coverage, taking on you know, defensive attention, so to speak, and how it opens up things for other guys in that offense. Paul Richardson is no longer the answer. Yep, Don, as I said. Whoever said everything I said is wrong, I said they wouldn't be interested or go after Paul Richardson, and I was right about that. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Will Green Bay try and wait out free agency and get somebody on the cheap? It's possible. You know, there are like 400 players still yet available in free agency. So I tend to think, yeah, this is kind of their MO. They've often, under Ted Thompson anyway, you know, looked kind of asleep at the wheel early and then pick through the remains there in the second and third waves. Obviously, Jimmy Graham is a bit more than that, but I do think they'll be patient and look to see what kind of bargains are available later on. Hopefully we didn't overpay for Graham. We'll see. I want Bryce Butler from Dallas. That's an interesting choice, Mike. Why not Cobb instead of Nelson? Because he's younger and better. Do you think Geronimo will have a better year? Jennifer, if he's given the opportunity. Obviously, there's a big wide open hole there on the perimeter now that Nelson is gone. If he's given that opportunity, he should. It's up to him. Really hope Jordy goes to the Vikings. Oh, no. I don't want to see Jordy in anything but green and gold. Well, it's possible they still bring him back. Your pick at 14 in the draft, offense or defense? Thomas, good question. I tend to think they'll go defense. It could be anybody from, say, Harold Landry, the edge rusher. It could be Josh Jackson from Iowa. Got to let it play out a little bit, see what happens. I know Buffalo made the big trade yesterday to get up to number 9. Now they're looking, by reports, to get up to number 5. Clearly targeting a quarterback. That helps the Packers by pushing other talent down to them. We'll see. Justin, I think Graham is overrated. Justin, you are not alone. So do half the comments here and half the mentions on my Twitter feed. Does Michael Clark get more of a chance now? A little bit. I think Gift, just by the nature of maybe a few more reps being available. But again, we got a long way to go in the offseason to see what kind of players they add either through free agency or the draft. But yeah, I mean, he's got all the tools, but he's just incredibly, indescribably raw. And he's got a long way to go to be a, down in and down out contributor. Might this be an AJ Hawk scenario, release and sign for less? Yes, as I said at the top of the video, after that news broke, every possibility that they bring him back for a little bit less, but we'll see how it plays out. Will Pack bring back Morgan or look at Reed? Good question. I tend to think Morgan Burnett is going to be a little bit too rich for their blood, but they could bring him back, maybe on a team-friendly deal if he is amiable to it. Third contracts are always tricky, and they're very rare in Green Bay, but as far as Reed being a possible fill-in, I could see it if he's out there, say, after a week, but I'd be surprised if they went all in early. Jordy gone, go to a different team and kill us. Watch. It's possible, Wanda. If Rodgers can make Martellus Bennett look good despite his drops, there's no way signing Graham isn't a win. The one way to look at it. Should we move up instead of down, need more talent and fewer average players? It all depends on how they grade guys out on their board. And with so many quarterbacks expected to go early, especially in the top 10, you got to think some premier talent will be pushed down to them at 14. So there's not much incentive to move up unless someone they think is just out of this world, they have rated as a once-in-a-lifetime player, drops to, say, 8, 9, 10, and they feel they have to go up and get it. That's the one way I could see it playing out that way. But other than that, I highly doubt it. Is Hundley tradable, or is that window slammed shut and nailed closed? Justin, I would say that window is gently closed with a firm hand, not nailed shut, but I would be surprised if a team was willing to give up any kind of assets to go get him. George, is Jeff Janis coming back? I tend to think he'll be allowed to explore free agency, but I don't doubt that they would welcome him back on a team-friendly rate. Let's see. What's word on Jordy maybe resigning for less? It's a possibility, Mike. Do you think letting Jordy go was a mistake? Good question, Carlos. That's something obviously we have to watch play out to see what their plan is as far as replacing him. I will only say this. I've always thought, and oftentimes teams do this, and fans get mad, especially with teams that, or with players, that are fan favorites. It is always better to get out from a player a year early than a year too late. And with Jordy Nelson, you definitely saw signs of age and slippage in his game last year. Yes, he was still effective with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback due to their many years playing together. There's no doubt that he could still be effective in Green Bay. Perhaps they bring him back at a reduced deal for that very reason. But it's always better to get out a year too early than a year too late. Father Time is undefeated. He was definitely knocking at the door for Jordy Nelson. The Packers are forcing themselves to get better at that wide receiver spot. I don't think that you can say, definitively sitting here today on March 13th that it's a mistake. A lot will depend on what their plan is to replace him and the production that he brought to the offense with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Now, is Jimmy Graham, the swap there? Possibly because of his, obvious talent in the red zone, putting up touchdowns. That's what Jordy Nelson did very effectively with Aaron Rodgers, especially last season. But obviously there's a lot more to it than that. You'll have to watch what they do the remaining of the offseason, both in free agency and the draft, to say, even then, after, the ink dries on all the contracts and they get done with the draft and they go into training camp, we'll have an idea of what the plan was, but we still have to let the season play out. First blush, I understand it. I know it's hard for Packer fans to see Jordy Nelson and say goodbye, possibly, from a player who's brought so much production to Green Bay and clearly been a great teammate and a great representative for the franchise. But man, Father Time, it's undefeated, and he was definitely knocking at the door. All right, everybody, I'm going to get going. I'll jump back on tonight if there's any other big news, but in the meantime, make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. We'll have each and everything that you need to know. Otherwise, I'll either talk to you later tonight or I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night.